Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about Home Fire by Kamila Shamsie. I read this book a couple of days ago. It was a really wonderful book. I really loved the ending. It was bombastic, without giving too much away. Anyway, yeah, I have been wanting to read this book for quite a while now. It's sort of like part of my tiny personal project of reading the as many as possible the winners for the Women's Prize, and I still have a bunch that I want to read later, and Home Fire is probably like one of the best books of the bunch that I've read so far. Last year I read How to Be Both by Alice Smith. That one was wonderful as well. And yeah, but today I'm going to talk about Home Fire and why I think you guys should read it as well if you have not. So basically Home Fire is actually you could say it's kind of like a modern retelling of the Greek play by Sophocles called Antigone. And to be honest with you, I actually plan to read the play Antigone alongside Home Fire, but then I guess that plan just did not, I just did not go through with it. I read like the first few parts of the play, but then I sort of just forget about it. And I was so immersed with this novel by Shamsie, and I guess that just goes to show that you can actually enjoy Home Fire without really knowing the original Greek play. So yeah, if you don't know anything about Antigone, you don't know anything about the storyline, you don't know anything that happens in that play, you will still be able to enjoy Home Fire as much as I did. I kind of knew what happened in the original play, and what happened in Home Fire just sort of parallels that, so that's really interesting. So I would still think that if you do have the opportunity to read Antigone, perhaps you should try and read them as a companion piece as well, like I planned to do in the first place. But just in case if you are not interested or if you don't have the ability to do so, it's totally fine. Reading Home Fire by itself is just great as well. So yeah, before I talk about why you should read Home Fire, what is Home Fire about? So we have these characters. First of all, we have these characters, three characters. They are all siblings. They are all British of Pakistani descent, and they live in the UK. So we have the older sister. Her name is Isma, and then Isma has two younger siblings, and those younger siblings are twins actually. One of them is called Anika, and her brother is called Parvais, and all three of them are living in the UK. They're essentially an orphan. So in this story, Isma is already 28 years old, meanwhile Anika and Parvais are 19 years old, and their mother died when they're quite young. So and what's very important in this book, a very important detail, is that their father used to be a jihadist, and their father died sometime when Anika and Parvais are really young, like when they were toddlers, and Isma was like a little child at the time. But the fact that the father used to be a terrorist just sort of cast this like really dark cloud over this the childhood of these siblings, because of their connection with this, with their terrorist father. They are kind of under some surveillance by the British government, and so you can kind of imagine that their childhood has not been like super awesome. It has been like there has been like all of this like really kind of undertones or just sort of like a hum in the background where they just sort of have to deal with racism and Islamophobia and the knowledge of the fact that they are related to a terrorist. So what really instigates the story in this book is that, so basically in the present we have Anika and Parvaiz. Isma is studying for her PhD in America, and then Anika is planning to study for in university, studying law. Meanwhile, Parvaiz is sort of unemployed, and he does not plan to go to college. And one day, someone just sort of approaches Parvaiz, and this person, his name is Farouk, he just kind of he just tells Parvaiz that, hey, I know your father. Your father used to work for this organization. He used to go to such and such countries. He was such a hero. He was so awesome, and he was like really loyal to the cause, to the religion, and to the community. But everyone else has been like doing him dirty. The government did him dirty, and people just sort of hate him, but actually he's like really awesome. And when Parvaiz, when he hears this, he actually kind of becomes fascinated because of the fact that when he is a child, he has largely been growing growing up under this environment when he has not been experiencing a lot of moments with his father. Basically, his father has been absent from his life, and so he lacks this father figure. All his life growing up, he has been surrounded by women, by female family members. First the mom, and the mom passed away, and then the mom's friend took care of them when they were kids, and then after that he spends a lot of his time with his sisters. So plenty of like just women around him, but not really a masculine father figure in his life. And so when he hears this story from this guy talking about how his father used to be like this really awesome and heroic guy, he was fascinated. He was enchanted by it, and he just sort of followed this guy, and inadvertently allowed himself to be recruited into ISIS. And because of this, he sort of just made the decision to flew out of the UK to Pakistan and got himself like working as the media arm over there. But when he is there, he sort of experienced this like a change of mind, and he wants to go home, but it's all going to be like really, really difficult and complicated because he's now working for a terrorist organization, and his passport has been confiscated by the organization, and he wants to go home, but in his effort to do so, he is killed. Okay, so this is not spoiler. This is not really a spoiler. The main conflict in this book actually comes when Anika, his sister, wants to bring his body back home, basically to just bury his body together with their mom. But because of such laws that is kind of being enacted by the Home Secretary, who we will later find out is like has some kind of ties with this with these siblings. Basically, the Home Secretary has a son, and the son is actually in a relationship with Anika and also with Isma. So they're all kind of like tied together. And Anika, she has difficulty in bringing the body home because the Home Secretary pretty much says, no, you can't do that. He's a terrorist, so he can't go home even if he's dead. And that kind of prompts Anika to do certain things that hopefully would allow her to bring the brother's dead body home. So you could kind of see the parallel with the original Greek play of Antigone. Basically, that play also involves some kind of attempt to bring a family member's body back home, and the body cannot be brought home because of such and such laws and rules that were enacted by the authority. And there is this sort of like conflict between this family person, this family member, and also the person in power over this whole thing. It's sort of like turning into this kind of a David versus Goliath kind of a situation. So if you like that kind of story where you have the a struggle that happens between an underdog and also versus someone in a position of power, this book is probably something that you might be interested in, because now we see that we have this character Anika who just wants to get her brother's body home. She literally has to fight against the government. She has to fight against the Home Secretary in order to achieve her goal. And we are left, we just want to find out, what is she going to do? How is she going to achieve that? And I think that part is kind of interesting in this book. There are a few avenues that she pretty much, a couple of them, a couple of ways that she tries to achieve her goal. But it's really interesting how her attempts just sort of move this story forward. And so I would say that Anika is kind of like the main character in this book, like the main person who is driving the plot in this book. So this book is actually written in this kind of like unique style. I wouldn't say like very unique, but it's quite interesting. So the book is divided into 5 sections, and each of these 5 sections, they focus on the protagonists, different protagonists of this book. So we have 5 protagonists. We have the 3 characters I already mentioned earlier, the siblings, and so basically the first section is told with the focus on Isma, the older sister, and then the second section is actually told. It is actually focusing on the son of the Home Secretary Karamat Lone, and the son's name is Ayman, and Ayman sort of has a relationship with Isma, and then later Anika. And that relationship part is kind of interesting because we get to see the motivation behind the relationship, why the relationship happens, if the relationship is like, how is the relationship? Is it like, how is it going to unfold? But what's one thing that I find really interesting with the character of Ayman is that I find his name really interesting. I mean, yes, his name sort of parallels the name of Haman in the original play. Yeah, that's interesting. But I find it really interesting that his name, the reason why he's given the name Ayman in this story is, it's fascinating, so I'm going to get to that later. We also have the third section of this book written with a focus on Parvais, on why he decides to join ISIS, and why he decides to fly to Pakistan and just literally get himself roped into this terrorist organization. The fourth section is quite unique because it's not written in this like conventional prose. It focuses on Anika and her response towards Parvais's death, and it's written in this sort of like a mixture of different formats. So we have a poem in there, we have a news article, we also have tabloid article, we have just normal conventional prose, just pretty much very different kinds of style being jumbled into this fourth section. And I think there is one subsection in Anika's section that is kind of like just a set of hashtags. So it's really interesting. This part I think is probably the strongest part in this book, It's probably the most creative, I think, and I really loved it. And the final section in this book is told through the with the focus on the Home Secretary. So his name is Karamat, and he, even though he's like someone who has a who holds a powerful position in the government, he is very tied to these other characters who are just kind of, these siblings who are just kind of commoners in the society. So back to why I think the name of the son of the Home Secretary to be like really interesting. His name is Eamon, so it's kind of like Eamonn, an Irish name, but he is also of he's also kind of Muslim. I think he's Muslim. The same goes with the Home Secretary as well. The Home Secretary is also a Muslim, Karamat. So these father and son, they're both like Muslims. The son especially is kind of interesting because he has an Irish name, but at the same time his name kind of doubles as the Muslim name of Ayman. So it's kind of like it really shows like one of the most important questions I think this book really wants to share with us, and that is the question of identity. So he has an Irish name that also kind of doubles in pronunciation like a Muslim name, which I find really interesting. And one of that question is like how, it's the question of identity. How do you want to how do you want to show your identity? How much you want to show your identity? How much of your identity that you want to ditch in order, in favor of assimilating with the local culture, or versus how much of that identity do you want to hold on to? Like, do you want to hold on to 100% of that identity and just set yourself apart from the local society? Or do you want to be just like the local society and just get rid of all of your original culture, for example? And I think this question is like really, really relevant to people of migrant origins, like people who have had ancestors coming from a totally different place, or even people who in their own lifetime comes from a different hometown or home country with a totally different culture. And it's a question of whether they want to bring that culture in and retain it in their lives and run the risk of being totally different and perhaps getting in conflict with the local culture, or do they want to just kind of hide that part of themselves and assimilate, or do they want to just actively renounce that part of their life, renounce their culture and just sort of becomes one with the local society? So it's kind of like, this is kind of like the main question I think that is permeating in this book. And I feel like all of these 5 different characters, they just sort of answer this question in their own ways, because these 5 characters that have been kind of they were described as this really human characters who respond to this question of identity in ways that are very varied, but also fairly logical, because all of their responses have been kind of influenced by their place in their life, their position, and also their family background, especially for the siblings, because they have a father who was a terrorist, but at the same time a father who was absent from their life. And so we see how these 3 different siblings kind of react to that, and also how they kind of use that, and how that kind of shape how they consider their own identity, how they should show their identity. So we have Isma, who is someone, she has kind of like experience a little bit of her life with her father, basically, and compared to her siblings who has literally never seen the father, she has spent some time with the father. But then again, the father never really sees Isma because Isma is a girl, so his father never really like treats her as important, and Isma just sort of feels like she's not needed or not important by the father, and Isma does not have a strong feeling towards the father. And when it comes to her family situation being viewed as a family related to a terrorist, she just sort of, she believes in the religion, she retains some of her culture, but she also has some desire to just blend in with the society. And then we kind of contrast that with Parvais, who has been experiencing this lack of father figure in his life, and so he is kind of driven by this motivation in which he wants to reconnect with his father, even though his father was probably a terrorist. But he was painted in this like really positive light, and he was just really desperate to get to that root of his, even when the root is possibly something that was kind of tainted. But in the end, it kind of drove him to do something that was probably not very wise, and kind of cost him his life. And when you contrast the situation of the family members with the other characters, in the Home Secretary, who is also a Muslim, he's in a totally different position. Obviously, he didn't have the terrorist father, but he's a politician, and being a Muslim in the UK, it wouldn't be like really easy for him to just like gain support from everybody. Either he has to be in favor of assimilating with the locals, or he kind of has to say something that would get either the white British or the Muslim British to be mad at him. So he's kind of in a precarious situation. But because he's a politician and he's really ambitious, he kind of has to be a little bit so-called flexible with his stance when it comes to his own identity as a British and also Muslim. And as a result, even though he is able to kind of climb the ladder of politics, he is not viewed favorably by the Muslim community around him. So these are just kind of like examples of how these characters view their their identity, and I found it really fascinating, and I just really love that. I think the way that I describe is probably does not do this whole portrayal of the characters justice. If you really want to know how these characters just sort of deal with this question, you should just read the book. And and I think that's all that I'm going to say about this book for now. Maybe if I have some new insights, I will kind of mention them again in any of my wrap-up, or just sort of like, I don't know, future Bookish avec moi chit-chat video. So that's it for now. So I'll see you again in a different video. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching, and bye.